Dr. Cole stood at the edge of the excavation pit and looked down at the symbols carved into the ancient stone. She had spent 3 years on this forgotten world called, and every day brought new mysteries. The twin moons hung low in the purple sky, casting double shadows across the ruins that stretched for miles in every direction. Behind her, the small research outpost hummed with activity. 23 humans lived and worked here, far from Earth and far from help. They had come to study the remains of a civilization that vanished long before humanity learned to walk upright. The locals called them the Ascended, though no one knew if that name was accurate or just hopeful thinking. Wiped the dust from her hands and climbed down the metal ladder into the pit. The air grew cooler as she descended, and the walls changed from rough stone to something smoother, almost like glass. She had discovered this chamber just 3 days ago, hidden behind a wall that had stood sealed for thousands of years. Captain Leo Grant waited for her at the bottom. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a protective nature that sometimes annoyed but mostly made her feel safe. His job was to keep the research team alive, and he took that responsibility seriously. "You should not be down here alone," Leo said. "We still do not know what these machines do." Smiled and walked past him toward the central platform. "That is exactly why I need to be here. Sam thinks he has translated the main inscription. He believes this is some kind of power source." Leo followed her with his hand resting on his weapon. A power source that has been dormant for how long? Thousands of years, millions, and we are just going to turn it on. "We are going to study it first," said, "then maybe turn it on." The chamber was vast, with ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. Strange devices lined the walls, their purpose unknown. In the center stood a pillar of crystalline material that seemed to glow faintly from within. Approached it carefully, her scanner recording everything. Dr. Sam Vance appeared from a side passage, his tablet clutched to his chest. He was the youngest member of the senior team, barely 30 years old, but his skill with languages had proven invaluable. He had cracked codes that machines could not solve and found meaning in symbols that others dismissed as decoration. "You need to see this," Sam said. His voice trembled with excitement. "The inscription calls this the Beacon of Judgment. It was built to test species, to determine if they were worthy of something the texts call the Great Inheritance." Felt her heart beat faster. Worthy of what exactly? Sam shook his head. "I am still working on that part, but there is more. The beacon is not just a test, it is also a signal. When activated, it broadcasts across the entire galaxy. Every species with the technology to listen will know it has been found." Leo stepped forward with concern on his face. "That sounds like a very bad idea. We are alone out here. If something hostile picks up that signal, we have no way to defend ourselves." "The beacon has already been partially activated," Sam said quietly. "The energy readings we detected last week were the beginning of its broadcast. Something we did must have triggered it." Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had feared something like this. The Ascended had built wonders beyond human understanding, and humans had stumbled into their temple like children playing with fire. Maya Torres came running down the passage, her boots echoing against the stone floor. She was the team's engineer, responsible for keeping their equipment functioning on a world that seemed determined to break everything they owned. Her face was pale with worry. "Captain Grant, we have a problem," Maya said. "I just picked up a transmission from the colony on Vega 7. They are sending a warning. Helix collective warships have been spotted moving toward this sector." Leo's expression hardened. The Helix Collective was an alliance of 3 alien species that had been at cold war with humanity for decades. They were stronger, older, and far more numerous. The only thing that had prevented open conflict was the belief that neither side could win without terrible losses. "How many ships?" Leo asked. "The transmission was fragmented," Maya replied. "But it sounded like a full battle fleet. They will be here within days." looked at the glowing pillar and understood what had happened. The beacon's signal had reached across the stars, and the Helix Collective had heard it. They were coming for the ascended technology, and they would not ask politely for it. "We need to contact Earth," said. "Request immediate evacuation." Leo shook his head. "Even if Earth sends help, it will take weeks to arrive. The Helix will be here long before then." Sam looked up from his tablet. There might be another option. The inscriptions mention that the beacon can only be controlled by someone who passes its test. If the Helix cannot operate it, maybe they will negotiate instead of fight. "Or they will kill us all and take it anyway," Leo said. "These are not reasonable people we are dealing with, the especially. They see humans as insects to be crushed." Stared at the beacon and made a decision. "We are not leaving. This discovery could change everything we know about the galaxy. The Ascended left this here for a reason, and I intend to find out what that reason is." Leo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we dig in and hold. Maya, I need you to reinforce our defenses. Use whatever materials you can find. Sam, keep translating. We need to understand what we are dealing with. Stay close to the beacon. If anyone can figure out how it works, it is you." The team scattered to their tasks and remained alone in the chamber. She placed her hand on the crystalline pillar and felt warmth beneath her palm. The beacon was alive in some way, waiting for something or someone. Above ground, the twin moons continued their slow dance across the sky. But now their light was interrupted by shadows, dark shapes descending through the atmosphere. The first Helix scout ships had arrived, and the warfare was about to begin. Looked up at the ceiling as if she could see through solid rock to the sky beyond. She did not know if humanity was ready for this test, but she knew they had no choice but to try. The Ascended had left their legacy behind, and now humans would have to prove they deserved to claim it. The Helix blockade formed a ring around like a noose tightening around a neck. Counted 17 warships through the outpost's damaged sensors, each one carrying enough firepower to reduce the research station to ash. The aliens had not attacked yet, but their message had been clear. Surrender the Ascended technology or face destruction. Captain Leo Grant stood in the command center with his arms crossed and his jaw set firm. He had faced difficult situations before, but never anything like this. His entire security force consisted of 8 people with light weapons and no combat training beyond basic drills. "They are hailing us again," Maya Torres said from her station. She had not slept in 2 days and dark circles had formed under her eyes. "Same demand as before. Hand over the beacon or suffer the consequences." Leo shook his head. "Tell them our answer has not changed. We are scientists, not soldiers. We have no authority to surrender alien artifacts to foreign powers." Maya sent the message and waited. The response came quickly and her face went pale as she read it. "They say they are done waiting. Ground forces will be deployed within 6 hours." Entered the command center with Sam Vance close behind her. She had spent the entire night in the beacon chamber, studying the inscriptions and trying to understand what the Ascended had created. Her clothes were covered in ancient dust, and her eyes were red from exhaustion, but there was excitement in her voice. "I know what the beacon does," said. "It is not just a power source or a signal. It is a test, a trial for any species that finds it. The Ascended used it to judge whether civilizations were worthy of joining something they called the Great Assembly." Sam pulled up images on his tablet and showed them to Leo. Every species that failed the test was destroyed, not by the beacon itself, but by their own choices. The technology amplifies what is already inside a species. If they are driven by greed and conquest, it turns that against them. Leo frowned at the images. "And if they pass the test?" "Then they ascend," said. "They join the Ascended and gain access to knowledge and power beyond imagination. But no species has passed the test in over 10,000 years." Before anyone could respond, The sensors detected new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Maya's fingers flew across her console as she analyzed the readings. "Human ships," she announced with relief in her voice. "A battle group led by the carrier Endurance, Admiral Karen West commanding." Leo allowed himself a small smile. Karen West was a legend in the fleet, a veteran of 3 alien conflicts who had never lost a ship under her command. If anyone could stand against the Helix Collective, it was her. The communication screen flickered to life, and Admiral West's weathered face appeared. She was older than had expected, with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too much death, but her voice was steady and strong. "Research Station, this is Admiral West. We received your distress call and came as fast as we could. What is your situation?" Leo stepped forward. "Admiral, we have discovered an alien artifact of extreme importance. The Helix Collective has blockaded the planet and is demanding we surrender it to them. We have refused." Admiral West nodded slowly. "I see 17 Helix warships on my sensors. I have 4 ships and a carrier with half its fighter complement. The math is not in our favor." "We understand," said, "but this technology cannot fall into Helix hands. It has the power to reshape the galaxy. In the wrong hands, it could mean the end of humanity." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked directly through the screen. "Then we hold the line, no matter the cost." The Helix Collective did not wait long to respond to the human reinforcements. Commander, a massive warrior with scales the color of dried blood, appeared on all frequencies with a declaration of war. His species had always considered humans to be vermin, barely worth the effort of extermination. Now they would prove it. But not all members of the collective shared hatred. Deep in the Helix fleet, a diplomat named Xyra watched the human ships take position against impossible odds and felt something unexpected: curiosity. They were in species with compound eyes and delicate limbs, more scholars than warriors. They had joined the collective out of fear, not loyalty. Xyra had studied humans from a distance for many years. They were young and fragile and should have been easy to conquer. Yet somehow they had survived every challenge the galaxy had thrown at them. Perhaps there was something special about this species, something they were too blind to see. Using a private channel, Xyra sent a message to the human outpost. The transmission was risky and could mean death if discovered, but the diplomat had to know the truth. "Human scientists, I am Xyra of the... I do not agree with Commander's methods. Tell me about this beacon you have found. What does it truly do?" Sam received the message and brought it too. She considered the risk carefully, then decided to respond. "The beacon tests species for worthiness. It judges not power or intelligence but something deeper: compassion, sacrifice, the willingness to protect others even at great cost to oneself." Xyra absorbed this information with growing wonder. They had ancient legends about such tests, trials left behind by elder races to guide younger species toward enlightenment. Could the legends be true? "If what you say is accurate," Xyra replied, "then the collective has already failed. Commander cares only for conquest. He will destroy your world to claim the beacon, never understanding that destruction is the opposite of what it requires." Felt hope for the first time since the blockade began. "Then help us. Stand with us against the... Show the galaxy that there is another way." The communication went silent. Xyra had to make a choice that would change everything. Outside, the twin moons began their slow alignment, and the beacon pulsed with growing power. The test had begun for everyone, human and alien alike. Commander gave the order and launched from the Helix fleet. The ground invasion had started. The first touched down 3 miles from the research outpost, and Captain Leo Grant watched through his binoculars as warriors poured out onto the purple soil of. They were massive creatures, each one standing over 7 feet tall with armored scales and weapons designed to tear through metal. There were hundreds of them, and more ships were landing every minute. Leo lowered his binoculars and turned to his small team. 8 people stood before him, scientists and technicians who had never fired a weapon in anger. They were all he had to defend against an army. "We cannot win a direct fight," Leo said honestly. "But we do not need to win, we just need to buy time to figure out the beacon. The temple complex is a maze of tunnels and chambers. They do not know it like we do. We hit them, we fall back, we hit them again. Make them pay for every step." Mayators had rigged defensive positions throughout the temple entrance. Motion sensors, improvised explosives, and narrow where numbers would not matter as much. She was not a soldier, but she understood engineering, and warfare was just engineering with deadlier stakes. The advance was fast and brutal. They crossed the open ground in disciplined formations, their confidence visible in every movement. Commander led from the front, his massive frame easy to spot even at a distance. He had conquered dozens of worlds and expected this one to fall just as easily. The first explosion caught the lead formation completely off guard. Maya's sensors had triggered a chain reaction that sent rocks and debris raining down on the warriors. 3 fell immediately, and the rest scattered for cover. Leo smiled grimly. That got their attention. Fall back to position 2. The humans retreated deeper into the temple while they regrouped. Commander roared orders at his troops, furious that these insects had dared to resist. He sent scout teams into the tunnels with orders to find and eliminate all human defenders. The scouts did not return. The temple was a labyrinth of passages that shifted and changed in ways that made no sense. Doorways that had been open moments ago were now sealed. Corridors led in circles. They found themselves lost in darkness while the humans struck from shadows and vanished before they could respond. Leo used every trick he knew and invented new ones on the spot. He set false trails that led to dead ends. He collapsed tunnels behind retreating teams. He even used the temple's strange acoustics to make 8 defenders sound like 80. They could not adapt to an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Deep below the surface, Cole ventured alone into passages that had never been explored. The beacon was calling to her, its light guiding her through chambers filled with wonders she did not have time to study. She passed walls covered in murals showing civilizations rising and falling, species being tested and found wanting. The scale of history contained in this place was overwhelming. She reached a chamber that was different from the others. The walls here were not stone but something alive, pulsing with soft blue light. In the center stood a figure, or what remained of one. It was not flesh but light shaped into humanoid form, a recording left behind by the Ascended themselves. "You have come far," the figure said in a voice that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her mind. "But the test is not complete. The beacon requires a guide, a consciousness to direct its power. Without a guide, it will judge all present and find them wanting." Stepped closer. "What happens to those who are found wanting?" "They are shown the truth of themselves. For most species, that truth is unbearable. They destroy themselves rather than face what they have become." In orbit, the battle had begun in earnest. Admiral Karen West commanded her small fleet with precision born from decades of experience. Her ships were outnumbered 4-1, but she used the planet's moons as cover, darting in and out of sensor shadows to strike at vulnerable helix vessels. The carrier Endurance launched wave after wave of fighters that harried the enemy formation. They could not destroy the helix fleet, but they could bleed it. Every ship damaged was one less that could threaten the people on the surface below. Admiral West knew she was going to lose. The math was simple and cruel, but she also knew that sometimes losing slowly was a kind of victory. Every hour she held the line was another hour for the scientists to complete their work. Her flagship took a direct hit that killed 30 crew members and crippled the main engines. Another captain might have retreated, but West simply transferred her flag to a destroyer and kept fighting. She broadcast an open message on all frequencies: human and alien alike. This is Admiral Karen west of the human fleet. We are not here to conquer, we are here to protect. The technology on belongs to no one species. It was left for all of us, a gift from those who came before. If we destroy each other fighting over it, we prove ourselves unworthy of that gift. Stand down. Let us find another way. The message reached every ship in both fleets and the soldiers on the ground below. It reached Xyra, who had been watching the battle with growing horror. The diplomat made a decision and opened a channel to other moderate voices within the collective. "The human speaks truth," Xyra said. "We are being tested, all of us, and we are failing. They have led us into a war that serves only their pride. How many must die before we see this madness for what it is?" The response was hesitant at first, then growing. Others agreed. Members of the third collective species, the aquatic, added their voices. Cracks appeared in Commander's coalition as doubt spread through the ranks. On the surface, Leo Grant held the final defensive line before the beacon chamber with only 3 defenders still standing. They were exhausted, wounded, and nearly out of ammunition. They were massing for a final push that would sweep them aside like leaves in a storm. Leo looked at his people and felt proud. They had done the impossible. Scientists and engineers had held off an army for hours. Whatever happened next, that could never be taken from them. "One more time," he said. "Give one more hour." They raised their weapons and prepared to face the end. Below them, placed her hand on the pillar of light and felt the beacon open before her like a flower greeting the sun. She understood now what was required. The test was not about fighting or winning. It was about what you were willing to give up for others. The twin moons reached their alignment, and the beacon asked a question that echoed through her entire being. "What are you willing to sacrifice?" Cole stood at the heart of the beacon with tears streaming down her face. The question hung in the air around her, waiting for an answer she was not sure she could give. The pillar of light had opened to reveal a space within, a gateway to something beyond human understanding. The figure of light spoke again. "To guide the beacon is to become part of it. Your consciousness will merge with the technology of the ascended. You will gain knowledge beyond measure, but you will lose much of what makes you human. You will never again walk among your people as one of them." Thought of her life back on Earth. She had parents who still sent her messages every week. She had friends who were waiting for her to return. She had dreams of quiet retirement by the ocean, writing books about her discoveries. All of that would be gone if she stepped into the light. But she also thought of Leo and his small team holding the line above her. She thought of Admiral West sacrificing her flagship to buy time. She thought of all the colonists on distant worlds who would suffer if the Helix Collective claimed this power for conquest. "If I refuse," asked, "what happens?" "The beacon will activate without a guide. It will judge all who are present, human and alien alike. Based on the conflict occurring above, that judgment will not be kind. Both fleets will be destroyed. The soldiers on the surface will die. The beacon will seal itself again and wait for another chance, another species that might prove worthy." Closed her eyes and made her choice. She stepped forward into the light. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced. It was like drowning and flying at the same time. Memories flashed through her mind, not just her own but the memories of countless beings who had stood in the same place across millions of years. Most had failed. They had reached for power instead of wisdom, and the beacon had rejected them. But a few had passed. They had given themselves freely, and they had ascended. Above, Commander led the final assault himself. His patience had run out hours ago, and now he would end this personally. The human defenders were barely standing, their weapons nearly empty, but still they refused to surrender. It enraged him beyond reason. "You are nothing," roared as he advanced. "Your species is a mistake of evolution. Today I will correct that mistake." Leo Grant stood in his path with an empty rifle in his hands. He had no ammunition left, no tricks remaining, nothing but his own body between the commander and the beacon chamber below. His two surviving teammates stood beside him, equally defiant and equally helpless. "You might kill us," Leo said calmly, "but you will never break us. That is something your kind will never understand." Raised his weapon to fire, and the world changed. Light erupted from beneath the temple, a pillar of brilliance that shot up through stone and soil and atmosphere into the sky above. It touched the twin moons and spread across the heavens like ripples in a pond. Every ship in orbit, human and helix alike, was bathed in its glow. The beacon had activated, and Cole was at its heart. She saw everything now. She saw the battle in orbit, each ship visible as a collection of minds and fears and hopes. She saw the soldiers on the ground, both the humans desperately defending and the mindlessly attacking. She saw Commander, his rage and hatred laid bare before her enhanced perception. She saw Xyra, the doubt and courage warring within the diplomat. And she saw the truth that the Ascended had discovered so long ago. Species did not fail the test because they were weak or stupid. They failed because they could not see past themselves. They could not imagine a universe where different beings worked together instead of fought. They could not believe that sacrifice for others was strength rather than weakness. Reached out with her new awareness and touched every mind in the system. She did not force them to do anything. She simply showed them what she could see. She showed what their endless wars had cost them, the planets left barren, the species exterminated, the potential squandered on conquest. She showed the humans their own flaws, the fear and prejudice that had kept them from reaching out to alien civilizations with friendship instead of suspicion. She showed everyone the vision of what could be if they chose differently. Commander fell to his knees as images flooded his mind. He saw himself through the eyes of those he had conquered, felt their terror and despair as if it were his own. For the first time in his life, he understood what he truly was, and the knowledge was devastating. In orbit, Admiral West lowered her weapons as the light washed over her damaged ship. She had been prepared to die fighting, but now she saw another path. She opened communications with the Helix fleet, not to threaten but to offer peace. "This is Admiral West. I am standing down. The beacon has shown us the truth. We have all failed this test through our actions today, but failure does not have to be final. We can choose to be better. We can choose to work together. Will you join me in making that choice?" Silence stretched across the void. Then Xyra spoke, broadcasting to both fleets. "We'll stand down. We have been followers for too long. It is time we became builders instead of destroyers." Other voices joined in. They agreed to cease hostilities. Even some commanders, shaken by what the beacon had revealed, ordered their troops to hold position. The coalition was fracturing, but from the cracks, something new was emerging. On the surface, Commander looked up at Leo Grant with eyes that had changed. The hatred was still there, but it was buried now beneath layers of confusion and shame. He could not process what he had experienced. The certainty that had driven his entire life had been shattered in an instant. "What has your scientist done?" asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Leo looked toward the pillar of light still rising from the temple. "She passed the test. She showed us what we could be instead of what we are." The commander stood slowly, his massive frame seeming somehow smaller than before. He looked at the three exhausted humans who had held against his entire force and saw them differently now. Not insects to be crushed, but beings who had proven their worth through courage and sacrifice. "I withdraw my forces," said. The words sounded strange coming from his mouth, as if he were speaking a language he had never learned. "This world belongs to those who earned it." Deep below floated in a sea of light and knowledge. She could feel the beacon working through her, testing everyone present one final time. The judgment had been rendered, and somehow, against all odds, they had passed. Not because they were perfect, but because they had shown the capacity to change. The twin moons completed their alignment overhead, and the beacon's light began to fade. But knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning. The Ascended had scattered their technology across the galaxy as seeds, waiting for species worthy of cultivating them. Humanity had just proven they were ready to join that ancient mission. Other beacons would be found, other tests would be faced. The work of building something better than war and conquest was only beginning. Opened eyes that were no longer entirely human, and prepared to guide her people toward the stars. The light faded slowly from the sky above, leaving behind a world transformed. The purple soil seemed richer somehow, more alive. The ancient temple no longer felt like a ruin but like a place of new beginnings. Cole emerged from the beacon chamber and climbed the stone steps toward the surface, though emerged was perhaps not the right word. She flowed more than walked, her form shifting between solid and luminescent in ways that made her old colleagues catch their breath. Captain Leo Grant stood at the temple entrance with bandages wrapped around his arm and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He had fought harder than any human should have been able to fight, and somehow he had survived. When he saw, his expression shifted from relief to uncertainty. She was still recognizable, but there was something vast behind her eyes now. He said carefully, "Are you still you?" She smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the determined archaeologist who had arrived on this world 3 years ago. "I am still me, Leo, just more than I was before. The beacon did not replace me. It added to me. I carry the memories and wisdom of every species that passed this test before us, thousands of civilizations across millions of years." Sam Vance rushed forward with his tablet, unable to contain his excitement even in the presence of something miraculous. "Can you read the inscriptions now? Do you understand what the Ascended really were?" Looked at the walls covered in symbols and felt understanding flood through her. The Ascended were not one species. They were many, united by passing the test and choosing to work together. They built these beacons and scattered them across the galaxy as a kind of invitation. Any species that proved worthy could join them. They wanted to create something that would last forever, a community of minds dedicated to growth and discovery instead of conquest. "And where are they now?" Maya Torres asked. She had crawled out of her engineering station after the battle ended, covered in dust and looking like she might collapse at any moment. "Gone," said with a note of sadness. "Not dead, but moved on. They explored this universe until there was nothing left to discover, then they found a way to move beyond it entirely. But they left their legacy behind for species like ours to inherit." Outside the temple, the aftermath of battle was visible in every direction. Sat abandoned on the purple soil, their crews uncertain what to do now that the war had ended before it truly began. Human and Helix soldiers stood in awkward clusters, enemies who had suddenly been told to stop fighting without any clear understanding of why. Commander stood apart from his troops, staring at the twin moons with an expression that might have been shame or might have been wonder. The beacon had shown him truths he could not ignore, and now he had to decide what to do with that knowledge. Approached him without fear. The massive warrior could have killed her with one blow, but somehow she knew he would not. The test had changed him just as it had changed everyone else. "You feel lost," said gently. "The purpose that drove you for so long has been revealed as empty. You do not know who you are without it." Turned his ancient eyes toward her. "I have conquered worlds. I have destroyed civilizations. The beacon showed me every death I caused, made me feel their pain as if it were my own. How can I live with that?" "By choosing differently from now on. The past cannot be changed, but the future is not written. You could spend your remaining years destroying, or you could spend them building. The choice is yours." In orbit, Admiral Corinne West was supervising repairs to her damaged fleet when a message arrived from the Helix ships. Sora requested permission to come aboard for diplomatic discussions. It was unprecedented. No had ever set foot on a human vessel in the entire history of contact between their species. West granted permission immediately. She met Sora in the Endurance's damaged conference room, surrounded by sparking cables and cracked viewports. The diplomat moved with careful grace, compound eyes taking in every detail of the human ship. "Your vessel has suffered greatly," Sora observed, "yet you did not retreat." "We could not," West replied simply. "The people on that planet were depending on us." They seemed to consider this. They would have retreated. They value survival above all else, even honor. Your species is different. You will suffer and die for abstractions like duty and loyalty. It is strange and admirable. "It is how we are made," West said. "We cannot help what we are." "Perhaps that is why you passed the test," Sora said thoughtfully. "The beacon does not judge species for being powerful or intelligent. It judges them for what they are willing to sacrifice. Your people have proven they will give everything for those they protect." The negotiations that followed were difficult but surprisingly productive. Sora spoke for the Anthe, who had agreed to form a new alliance separate from the commander, after hours of soul-searching, announced that he would return to space and attempt to convince his people to change their ways. He did not expect to succeed, but he had to try. Admiral West proposed that become neutral ground, a place where any species could come to study the Ascended legacy under joint supervision, would remain as guardian of the beacon, ensuring that its power was never abused. Days turned into weeks as the various fleets departed and the first diplomatic missions arrived. Scientists from a dozen species began working together in the temple complex, sharing knowledge and discoveries in ways that would have seemed impossible before the beacon's activation. Suspicion and fear slowly gave way to curiosity and respect. Watched it all from the temple steps, her enhanced perception allowing her to see every conversation, every small moment of connection between beings who had been enemies just weeks before. It was not perfect. There were arguments and misunderstandings and occasional flare-ups of old hatreds, but the foundation had been laid for something new. Leo Grant found her there one evening as the twin moons rose over the horizon. He had decided to stay on as head of security for the new joint research facility. His fighting days were over, but his protective instincts had not faded. "Sam translated another section today," Leo said. "The Ascended left messages for whoever passed the test. Congratulations, instructions, that sort of thing. But there was one message that stood out." Turned her luminous eyes toward him. "What did it say?" "It said that passing the test was only the first step. There are other beacons scattered across the galaxy, each one guarding different pieces of the Ascended legacy. Species that prove worthy of one beacon are meant to find the others, to gather the scattered wisdom, and eventually follow the Ascended to wherever they went." Smiled and looked up at the stars. She could feel them now, distant pulses of ancient technology waiting to be found. The journey her species had begun on would continue for generations, maybe forever. Every test would challenge them, force them to grow, push them to become more than they had been before. "Then we have work to do," she said softly. The twin moons hung bright above them, and across the galaxy, other beacons stirred in their ancient slumber. They had sensed that someone had finally answered correctly. The great work of the Ascended was beginning again, and humanity would be part of it. Cole, no longer entirely human but forever connected to her species, stood guard over the first step of that endless journey. She had sacrificed much, but she had gained something greater in return: purpose, hope, a chance to guide her people toward a future worth building. And beneath the twin moons surrounded by the wonders of a vanished civilization, she felt at peace.